Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris, or welcome back. This is the deadliest battle of World War I, the Somme. This is a different channel, the Armchair Historian. I just did the Battle of Mud and Blood. Anyways, it was good. See me what I just did there? If you could do that for me, that helps. Yeah, it was right up the top. Hold on. Right at the top, Mud and Blood, Battle of Passchendaele, whatever it was. All right, I covered it. I just did it. I've already done World War I, but these are little spotlight videos, and I don't remember a lot of what I covered. So we're gonna do this because it's pretty cool. Sorry, hiccup. You saw me give the thumbs up. You can do that to me. It helps tremendously. If you could subscribe if you'd like to, that works. And if you want to sponsor a video, just donate through the thanks button and then tell me what video to react to. You can still, hiccuping. You can still request a video. It just takes a little bit longer. Okay, so let's get into this right now.
In the early morning of July 1st, 1916, as London residents slept, some would have awoken to the sound of a distant boom. It was no matter. London was a raucous city. Many would have gone back to bed, trying their best to ignore the faint reverberation. Across the English Channel, however, near the River Somme, what Londoners perceived to be a distant rumble was in fact a cacophony of destruction. The deadliest day in British military history had begun. We made a companion episode covering British tanks in World War I. More information at the end of this video. By the end of 1915, the First World War had devolved into a bloody stalemate, and the Entente powers of France, Britain, Russia, Italy, and Serbia were desperate for solutions. Throughout 1915, a key problem facing the Entente had been the unexpected maneuverability of German forces, which had allowed them to rapidly transfer troops between the different fronts of the war. To combat this problem, the leaders of the Entente decided that, in 1916, they would launch major offensives all simultaneously, stretching the German army to its limit and breaking the might of the Kaiser for good. While the Italians struck in the south and the Russians marched east, the British and French would launch their attack on the Somme. The Somme, a river in northern France, was the place on the Western Front where British and French forces met. Essentially devoid of strategic significance, it was for this reason, and this reason alone, that it was chosen as the site of the upcoming Anglo-French offensive. Facing off against two heavily defended German trench lines, with a third under construction, the initial plan envisioned 39 battle-hardened French divisions advancing in the south, while still inexperienced British and Commonwealth forces launched a supporting attack in the north. Though theoretically sound, this plan assumed that the Germans would not launch an offensive of their own. In this regard, the Entente guessed wrong. In February of 1916, the Germans unleashed a massive assault on the French fortress city of Verdun. As more and more French troops were drawn into the resulting whirlpool of death, the number of French divisions allotted to the upcoming Somme offensive dropped from 39 down to 12. The Entente's major offensive would now be a primarily British affair. Despite this change of plans, British command...
I just say, it seems to me, throughout history, France and the UK fight a lot. I know it's breaking news, right? They fight a lot. But it seems to be, when they come together and they fight alongside each other, when they can put that away and they come together to fight, there's a serious problem. That's why they're fighting together. Like, they bicker, they argue, they used to fight all the time, but when they came together, you knew that this is serious. It's two neighbors, two neighbors that live across the street that always bicker, and then all of a sudden they're standing shoulder to shoulder looking at the guy down the street going, that guy's going to be a problem, isn't he? Yep, All right, it's you and me versus him. Yep, you definitely. We're putting everything aside, but we're going to focus on that guy. Yep, exactly. All right, let's start it. Let's see how this rolls. You know, like that. It just seems like when they get together, that's how it happens. It's serious.
Commander Sir Douglas Haig was optimistic. After all, the ongoing Battle of Verdun had placed an enormous strain on the German army. Furthermore, after years of production, Haig believed that the British Army now possessed an adequate supply of artillery and ammunition to carry out a truly massive assault. Against the advice of his more cautious subordinate, Sir Henry Rawlinson, Haig decided that British forces would seize the first two lines of the German defenses simultaneously, maximizing their chance for a decisive breakthrough. Having learned the importance of artillery in previous campaigns, Haig sought to obliterate German positions at the Somme. While the Battle of the Somme...
Why can't we do that? Whenever we're about to have a war, both countries designate someone and you play best of 9 in chess, right? Whoever wins, you take on the other opposing military, you take the lowest person on the lowest section of the totem pole, the very lowest military person, and you just get to kick them in the testicles. Like, there you go. War averted. And everyone's like, yeah, look, I mean, we had the best of 9, and we did lose, and you had to pay the price for it. You'll be fine. A little bit of ice. You'll be fine. Just rest them. Take some ibuprofen. You'll be good tomorrow. It might be sore, but you'll be good. War's averted, fellas. What would you rather have? A kick in the balls? Or what's about to happen? Kick in the balls, please.
Raged on the Western Front in 1916, the 6th, 7th, and 8th battles of the Isonzo were also being fought along the Italian front. And thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Isonzo, the most recent title in Blackmill Games' World War I game series, you can relive this fierce engagement in a fully immersive, historically accurate first-person shooter set in the Italian Alps during the First World War. Fight as either the Kingdom of Italy or the Austro-Hungarian orders as an officer, and battle among the scenic leading up to the offensive. More than 1,500 British guns slammed 1.7 million rounds into the German front line. On the morning of July 1st, this bombardment intensified even further, and almost 250,000 shells were fired in barely an hour. Adding to the carnage, at 7:28 a.m.
250,000 shells were fired in an hour. I want to make sure I heard that.
Fired in barely an hour. Even further, and almost 250,000 shells were fired in barely an hour.
Holy cow. I don't even have words for that.
Adding to the carnage, at 7:28 a.m., the British detonated 10 massive mines that they had carefully placed under the German defenses. As British soldiers went over the top 2 minutes later, they must have asked themselves if any German could have possibly survived such a murderous barrage. The immediate rattle of enemy machine gun fire soon answered their question. While the British bombardment had been intense, its effectiveness had been severely limited by a critical lack of heavy guns. Out of the over 1,500 artillery pieces utilized by the British, only 233 were large enough to cause serious damage to German defenses. Furthermore, up to 30% of the shells fired by the British were duds. And Haig's decision to seize both German trenches simultaneously meant that the bombardment was diluted over a much larger area than it could have been. As a result of these miscalculations, most of the German defenses of the Somme were dazed, but still very much alive. As British troops rushed to achieve their overly optimistic objectives on the morning...
And the soldiers didn't know that, did they? They didn't know they were basically running into what they thought was going to be just a cleanup duty, right? You're going to just going in there and shooting those people, and then all of a sudden you're getting shot at, and you're like, this isn't how I thought it would play out. Man.
Morning of July 1st, a slaughter ensued. Laden with up to 60 pounds of gear, British soldiers struggled uphill to reach the German trench lines as machine gun and artillery fire rained down on them. With gaps in their own barbed wire cut too small, British soldiers were mown down in their hundreds as they bunched together, desperate to break through. In the first hour alone, the British suffered 30,000 casualties, with 500 men killed, wounded, or captured every single minute. Units such as the 1st Newfoundland Regiment lost up to 91% of their combat strength in a single attack. In the Devonshire Regiment, 159 men were killed by a single German machine gun. Amidst the Armageddon, however, there were some successes. In fact, south of the Bapaume Road, British forces actually achieved a majority of their objectives. Even further to the south, the French were also remarkably effective, capturing all of their objectives and taking 4,000 German prisoners without even having to call in their reserves. The successes in this region of the battlefield can be attributed to weaker German defenses, more effective French artillery, and innovative tactics. Despite these accomplishments, the first day of the Somme had been a cataclysmic failure. For the cost of 57,000 British casualties, Haig had still failed to achieve the majority of his objectives. Though the true scale of the slaughter slowly became known to British commanders after several days, the offensive itself was never reconsidered. As the French bled at Verdun, it was of critical importance that the British keep up the pressure on the Germans. The Battle of the Somme would rage on. In the aftermath of the first day, both the Germans and British attempted to consolidate their positions at the Somme. For the Germans, this meant pulling men and materiel from Verdun, reinforcing their already strong defensive positions. By July 10th, French intelligence concluded that the German defenses were stronger than they had been at the start of the battle. British attention, on the other hand, was focused on preparing for a second offensive, slated for July 14th. Learning from their mistakes on the first day, this attack would have much more limited objectives and take place over a much smaller front. The lead-up to July 14th was hardly quiet at the Somme. German tactical thinking insisted on retaking every inch of lost ground with bloody counterattacks, and British forces launched disorganized attacks of their own in an attempt to secure more favorable positions to launch their offensive from. When the second major British offensive at the Somme finally came, it was preceded by a whirlwind bombardment, followed just minutes later by a massive infantry assault. Though the overall strength of the British bombardment on July 14th was smaller than the one at the beginning of the battle, British artillery power was concentrated over a much smaller area of the front, meaning that every square yard of German defenses received 5 times the number of shells than it had 2 weeks prior. At Sir Rawlinson's insistence, this attack was also launched at night. As a result of Haig and Rawlinson's adaptations, the attack on July 14th was much more successful than their first offensive, largely capturing the second line of German defenses for relatively few casualties. Nevertheless, the decisive breakthrough had not been achieved. The next phase of the battle, which stretched from July 15th to September 14th, is sometimes referred to as the period of forgotten battles. During this phase, Haig and Rawlinson attempted to seize areas around Highwood, Delville Wood, and Guillemont in preparation for their next major assault scheduled for September 15th. What resulted was a confused and disorganized series of attacks which failed to gain any significant ground or properly integrate French support. In one especially brutal episode, Australian forces attempted to seize the village of Pozières. In just 6 weeks of fighting, nearly as many Australians were killed here than in 8 months of Gallipoli. The British attack on September 15th was envisioned by Rawlinson as a more limited operation, but Haig once again was determined to break the entirety of the German defense in one fell swoop. Like the first day of the Somme, this ambition resulted in artillery fire being diluted to a less effective density. Unlike the first day, however, Haig had a secret weapon. Development of the tank had begun in 1915 in the hopes of providing a weapon that could support vulnerable infantry advances across no man's land. Despite some of his shortcomings, Haig was an enthusiastic supporter of innovative military technology and saw potential in the tank, placing an order for 150 of these vehicles. However, by September 15th, only 49 tanks had arrived in France, with only 18 actually arriving on the battlefield without breaking down. Regardless, the attack went forward as planned. The British assault on September 15th introduced the world to the tank, but it also clearly demonstrated that the new weapons were still in their infancy, only being able to move at a measly 2 miles per hour in battlefield conditions and unable to navigate large craters. Haig and Rawlinson were forced to leave gaps in their own artillery barrage to facilitate the vehicle's advance. These pauses in artillery fire often led to British troops assaulting undershelled German positions to predictably fatal results. However, when combined with accurate artillery fire, tanks proved to be a potentially potent force. In the center of the British offensive, 12 tanks were able to support a successful infantry advance of around 3,000 yards, even if all of them had broken down by mid-afternoon. The first use of the tank was a qualified success. With their slow speed and abysmal reliability, tanks were clearly not capable of single-handedly ending the war. However, Haig has been vindicated by modern historians for using the tank as best as he could and immediately placed an order for 1,000 more of these vehicles. After another successful assault on September 25th, Haig hoped to continue offensive operations and achieve his long sought-after breakthrough. However, newly constructed German defenses meant that any such breakthrough would be monumentally challenging to pull off. Heavy October rains also complicated any potential offensives. Further bloody fighting continued until November, with British and French forces making limited advances in the north and south, but these small successes failed to breathe new life into the 140-day-long battle. With increasingly poor weather making further operations fruitless, Allied commanders finally began to acknowledge that there could be no decisive breakthrough. And on November 18, 1916, the Battle of the Somme finally came to an end. The cost of the Somme had been staggering. The British suffered 420,000 casualties, while the French suffered 205,000. German casualty figures are controversial, but are usually estimated at between 500,000 and 600,000. In return for these hundreds of thousands of
So you got 1.1, I'm sorry, yeah, 1.1, was it 5? 9, no. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth. I keep going after the 6. That'd be no, it's not 1.2. Be 1,025,000. I didn't. Nope. I'm just not. So 1.2 to 1.1. No, not. Oh my gosh, Chris. I'm saying 1.1. I'm meaning 1.015. Or 1.25. It's either 1,015,000 or 1 million. Well, I guess that would be. No, damn it, Chris! I keep skipping over the French numbers. So 1.1 to 1.2. I'm skipping over this number, and I'm looking at this and this, and I'm like, okay, it's 425,000, 625,000, plus 600,000, 1.25. Well, no, 1.025. No, I did it again. We get it. I keep skipping over the 2 for the French. My fault.
Of lives, the Entente had advanced just 7 miles. After the war, the Battle of the Somme came to be viewed as one of the defining cataclysms of the Great War, demonstrating the senseless slaughter of the conflict. However, some modern historians have begun to offer a different view, painting the battle as a costly, though necessary, victory for the Entente. While Haig and other British commanders made a number of key mistakes, the Battle of the Somme also caused the Germans to pull back their forces from Verdun, reconsider their positions on the Western Front, and eventually withdraw to the Hindenburg Line in 1917. Pivotally, the casualties suffered by the Germans at the Somme also made them desperate enough to begin unrestricted submarine warfare in the Atlantic, a strategy that would eventually lead to war with the United States and doom for Germany. If you want to learn more about British...
That was good. The numbers are just ridiculous. As Stalin said, 1 death is a tragedy, 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic. And it is. When you're looking at all those numbers, you're just like, wow. Over 1,000,000 people died? I can't fathom that. I cannot fathom. The thing is, you could look at a big city and say, okay, you know, this city has a population of 3 million people. Now remove 1 million people. Would you notice? Okay, there's only 2 people in this pizza shop instead of 3. Like, would you notice? There's some fewer cars on the road. It's just ridiculous. Okay, I'm gonna end this here. It's just, yeah. All right, I'm gonna end this here. Hope you enjoyed the video, even though it's not a video that should be enjoyed that way. Okay, till next time, have a good day, have a good night.